Hello, everyone, and welcome to Comic Book Gentlemen, the podcast where we use our decades of being giant nerds to discuss the most divisive issues in the fandom. I'm your host, Greg, joined by my constant co-host, Dave. How's it going, Dave?
It's going.
It's going. That's right. If you're a long-time listener, from the ashes, just like the titular X-Men, we're back.
Like the Phoenix.
Like the Phoenix, yeah. You can't just get rid of us.
Whenever in doubt with the X-Men, you just bring back the Phoenix. It resets everything.
Yeah, exactly. Just like podcasts. If you can't think of anything, wait till the Phoenix comes out, and then we'll talk about it again.
Exactly.
So yeah, as you can see from the title, we are going to be talking about the Krakoa Era of X-Men, which recently came to a close in 2024. It started all the way back in 2019, which is actually, we started our podcast just like right when it was
around that time.
Right around that time, right when it was getting started. So it's only fitting. It's only fitting that we're back right when it ends. And so what we're going to do for this podcast, we're going to give our general thoughts of the Krakoa Era. How do we think it stacks up to the other X-Men eras, as well as like specific runs that we really enjoyed, ones that we hated, all that fun stuff. Then at the very end, we're going to talk about From the Ashes, which is the new era of X-Men coming out this summer, what we're excited for, what we hope to see, and let's see what we're going into. So let's start from the very general, Dave. Krakoa Era.
Yes.
What do you think of it in general and like overview?
Divisive.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Like I think it took a lot of longtime X-Men fans, put them over here, and some of them over here, and basically for the last, what has it been, 6 years?
Yeah, 5 or 6 years.
5 or 6 years, it's just been, Twitter hell. Just the two sides fighting with each other about what it was. I think at the end of the day, these larger, kind of paradigm shifting moves, generally take a little time to get going. And then once they get going, then you kind of have an idea. Okay, is this good or bad? And I think looking at the number of issues, the number of everything, it was, I think, incredibly messy.
Yeah.
For a variety of reasons. Were there some really good things in there? Absolutely. Were there some really bad things in there? Absolutely. There was a little bit of mix of which you're going to get. Generally, it's never going to be knocking it out of the park 100%, but I felt like it was just a very, very divisive for the X-Men fan base, and it was also incredibly messy with as many writers moving in and artists moving in and out and shifting and titles starting and titles ending. It was very messy, very hard to follow at sometimes.
Oh, 100%, especially near the end.
Yes.
And we'll definitely get into that.
Yes.
But I think for me personally, I think the biggest thing for me for Krakoa was there's so much potential. Like you reset the X-Men who needed to reset after so many years after M-Day.
Yeah.
And you put in this new paradigm that opened the doors for so many possibilities.
Absolutely.
But I really felt like, especially once you get halfway through, you're like, okay, we're kind of spinning our wheels. We're kind of doing the same thing. And then it was suddenly just over.
Yeah.
And you're just like, oh, there's so much you could have done with this that you didn't. What happened? Type of thing. And I think, like, I'm not 100% super negative on it. I think the idea was so good that, like, I'm glad they went for it. I just really think that they could have used a bit more direction. Obviously Hickman had a vision and he was going for it at the beginning, but you can definitely tell the vision got moved out of the way by editors or something, and then it kind of just went from there.
Well, I did some digging on that, and because now that the era's over, right, and you have White, who's now left as the overall head of X, and you've got a lot of the writers that have moved on as well. You've now started hearing people talk about, this is something that we wanted to do, and this is something we wanted to do, and ultimately with Hickman, the most I could find was basically Hickman had a plan. And the turning point for the up and then the down was Inferno, and at that point he basically the rest of the writers group, because he was the head of X, came and said we're not done writing. Like we like this era, we want to write more, and he felt it was over. Like they needed to start working it down, and so he said, well, if there's that many people that like it, then you guys go ahead and do it, and I'll step away and I'll go do other things. And you saw another group of people take over and kind of run with it for the I'm going to say probably the last, what was Inferno, the end of the second reign of X. So Inferno was the end of there. So I mean, for the last two sections of this Krakoan age, were Hickmanless.
Yeah. Yeah, and like you said, like Inferno really encapsulates like the halfway point. Like you'd see, like even if you go read Inferno, which I do recommend reading, that almost had a definitive end to it. But then, like you said, it just kept going. And it's like, where are we going with this?
Yeah.
In general, and I know like it's hard to like name all the X-Men eras. Like this is definitely a very definitive one. But like, how would you rank the Krakoa era compared to other X-Men eras? I guess like would you be top 5, top 10? Like you think bottom of the barrel?
It's funny because I would split it into two. I think, like you said, on you know the idea and potential, I would have put it up near the top because it was so different, right? But the actual, did you land it? Did you stick and land it? I would put it near the bottom. You know, again, there were aspects that I liked and aspects that I wish they would have explored more, or changes that they made that were good for the good, but they also made a lot of changes and a lot of bad decisions along the way as well. Kind of like, you know, I look back on Grant Morrison. I was very conflicted with Grant Morrison's run. Because it just changed the status quo so much in the sense of like there were so many mutants.
Yep.
And there's this whole thing, and he just changed it. And there were. It took me a while to get used to it, to get used to where he was going and what his thoughts were, and just changing up the dynamics of what the X-Men were. And I think that's the same thing with this. I would give Dawn of X the pass because you're setting things up, and then after that it just started to. It kind of fumbled, in my opinion, at X of Swords. I thought X of Swords was so disappointing.
Yep.
I was expecting just a rumble. Yeah. Full-fledged rumble. And it just... I remember reading through that section going, when's it going to happen? When's something going to happen? And it just didn't seem to land for me. And then the second half leading into Inferno was good. And that's where I felt like, yes, I was on board with the Hickman train of going, this needs to start heading towards an end.
Yeah.
And I think that's where you probably saw the largest part of the fan base kind of diverge from each other, because that's where you had people go, you know, some X-Men fans saying, this needs to end. I'm with Hickman. Yeah. I need to go. And then you had the other group that were like, I like this. Yeah. I want it to stick around.
Yeah, I was okay with it sticking around. Like, I remember, again, during Inferno and stuff like that, I was okay with it, but again, it was like the expectation of, oh, they still want to play with this, and they're still going to find new ways to play with it. I think for me, what ended up happening was they kept playing with it, but they kept just, again, spinning their wheels, kind of doing the same thing over and over and over again, and we'll kind of get into that in a second. Yeah. And then it just got into a huge mess at the very end of, like, what is even happening anymore? Yeah. Okay, it's suddenly over, you know, type of thing. So we're gonna kind of break it down into like the various subsections of Krakoa. But you had an interesting fact about the amount of series that happened over this time period.
Yeah, so I counted up the like special events and series, kind of mini series that they had during the Krakoa era, and I may have missed some, but there were 16.
Oh my gosh.
It's 16 in 6 years.
In 6 years. Not even, it's like 5.5 at most,
Yeah, that's almost three a year.
Holy.
Like, that's a lot. And I mean, and some of those had multiple series within them. Yep. Like Sins of Sinister.
Oh, yeah.
Had, you know, three different comics that were going on with Sins of Sinister. So, like, you had, it was a lot of events. And I mean, I think this is a general complaint about Marvel. Don't know so much on the DC side, but definitely with Marvel is just event fatigue. Like, and you'll see it actually reading through some of this at one point where it just hits and you're like, will you stop? Can we just get back to the regular issues?
Yeah, that's the worst, is when you could see, like, in a specific series, they had to pause what they're doing to deal with the crossover event. You're just like, oh, it killed the momentum 100%. And you're like, what are you doing? 100%. Yeah.
And then it was the regular series runs, like your X-Men, your Wolverine went on. There were 24. 24 different comics that they ran during this period. Yep. A lot of them not making it to 50 issues, which, I mean, I think the standard, the gold standard is like 100. Yeah. You get to 50, okay. But you had 2 that reached 50. None of the rest reached that or even close to it. Yeah. There were only a handful that made it past 25. And over half of them that didn't even make it to 10.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Now, you can see, you could probably go in and ask, well, what about this series or what about that series? Oh, that was intended only to be 4 issues. And I go, no, it wasn't.
No.
Because I collect comics, I go in and I take a look, and if the subscription says 12 issues, you're an ongoing series.
Yep.
Right? If it says 4, then it's a limited series. It usually says limited series.
Usually.
So it was a lot.
100%. And like, I know we, obviously we're huge comic book fans, and we're big X-Men fans, obviously. I mean, can't think of how many episodes we've done on X-Men alone, but like, I did not come close to reading every single thing in the Krakoa area. I know. When you told me you were doing that, I was like, "You're insane."
Yeah.
Like, how far did you get?
I made it to Inferno.
Okay.
Reading everything from New Mutants to Excalibur to Fallen Angels to everything.
Wow.
And it was, I got to Inferno and I just couldn't do it.
Yep.
Just couldn't do it.
Yeah, I think what I did was, especially like from the beginning, I very much chose like, I'll dip my toes into a couple different ones, and like I definitely tried a lot more in the beginning than I did in the later ones, but I kind of found the ones I liked and stuck with it, and then obviously the event ones I would check out if it was big enough. But yeah, no, I definitely did not come close to reading all of them. So maybe, if you're listening to this and you're like, how can you rate the whole era if you haven't even read a single thing? I challenge you to try to read every single one. Like, that's insane.
It's a lot.
So let's start off at the very top.
Yeah.
House of X, Powers of 10. I think when we first did our podcast, one of the first things we did was like what are our favorite comic books recently.
Yeah.
I think both of us had this on our list because it was that good.
The art was great.
Art was great.
Writing was great.
Yep.
The direction was unique, interesting, bold, and set up for a very curious future.
Yes. Like, it was very interesting. I had a new coworker of mine ask, I want to get back into X-Men, where should I start? And of course he asked right at the end of the Krakoa era, but I still said, like, I still think you should give House of X, Powers of 10 a try. Even though it's like beginning from 5 years ago and it's just coming to an end now, I think that alone is so cool, and like the amount of stuff that's in there is so cool that I was like, anybody should go check that out type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, especially for a new reader, it's if you can start at the beginning of an era, whether it was, Grant Morrison's era, this era, Claremont's era, whatever era it is, that's a good starting on point for any reader, especially with this one. Is like, I mean, you're going to spend the next 2 years reading so many comics.
100%. So yeah, House of X, Powers of 10, really good. Kicks us off with a bang.
Yes.
We start the mutants in a whole new era of, they have their own nation. They're now, they have their own culture, language. They are all, nobody can die technically. No. Plus you had the idea of all the villains and heroes were living on the island together theoretically.
Yeah.
So now you go into Dawn of X, which was like a whole new, it's Wild Wild West if anything had happened.
Yeah.
What were some highlights for you? What were some series that you were like, this was great, keep it going?
I think I'll start with one that I was both happy with because of the art and the writer, but not so happy with the actual comic itself, which was the actual head title of X-Men.
Yep.
Because it was originally decided that it was going to be like a one story, one shot kind of issue each issue, and then somewhere along the line they changed their minds, and it was supposed to be like the House of Summers, and then it was it was just disjointed, and that's why it ended after, I think it was 21 issues.
Yep.
It petered out. I like the Wolverine. It came out of the gates really interesting. Wolverine wakes up and he has murdered all of X-Force. And he doesn't know why. That one was good. I actually really liked Fallen Angels.
Really?
Fallen Angels?
I never in a million years would have guessed Fallen Angels for you.
Fallen Angels I thought was one of the better ones. Marauders really surprised me because I didn't expect it to be as entertaining and as engaging as it was. Like, based especially on the cast. Like, there were a bunch of X-Men that I generally didn't follow, didn't really care, was never a huge Kitty Pryde, fan. Like, it was just a group of people that, outside of Storm and Iceman, it was like those were the two main familiar ones you get out of that. It was a good book.
100%. No, I agree with most of those. I think what was really cool about X-Men was, like you said, it wasn't the actual team of X-Men, but I liked what they did with the one-shots of like showing how things have changed and how everybody's relationships have changed and like the culture aspect of that. I thought that was really cool. Marauders, I'm happy. I liked the idea of Kitty Pryde going to Kate Pride.
Yes.
Like, you know, the problem with comics sometimes is you get locked in a time bubble and your characters never grow with you.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed the fact that Kitty was like, no, my name's Kate. I'm an adult now. I've, you know, rough and tumble. Let's do this. And I've always loved her relationship with Emma Frost. Put her and Emma Frost, you know, together, and we'll get into that at the very end of the podcast. Yeah. I'm always happy. And then again, X-Force and a couple other ones I think started off really strong too.
Yeah, X-Force was a good romp because it was like, okay, they can resurrect themselves?
Yeah.
Okay, let's put that to the test.
Everybody died so many times.
Let's just put that to the test. And it was just a rompy, fun, like, okay, I know I'm going to open this comic book and at least 3 of the team are going to bite it or have like major damage done to them. It was a lot of fun as well. I would say X-Force was also up there.
Yeah, and then my favorite one, not only of Dawn of X, but the entire Krakoa era, getting it right off the bat, Hellions. Mm-hmm. I loved Hellions, not only because I thought, well, one, the art was great, but I thought the writing was amazing with Zeb Wells. I thought he really did a great mix of humor plus seriousness. Like, you had all these characters that had a lot of trauma and issues in the past, and they're really learning in this new era of Krakoa of, like, we're kind of heroes now? Mm-hmm. You know, what does that mean, and how do we interact with people? And the amount of stuff they got up to was hilarious. Like, it was crazy.
You functionally, when you started off, you have a team that's being run by Mr. Sin.
Oh, you know it's going to be good.
Like, you know, who doesn't care about them?
Yes.
And is obviously just saying, hey, I'm going to send them in. They're going to die, and I don't care. Yeah. As long as I get what I want. And why should they care? Because we're just going to resurrect them anyways.
100%.
Right. It was a good book. And that's a prime example of one that was like, you came up with a concept.
Yeah.
Based off of, okay, Mr. Sinister is a part of the Quiet Council, and he's in the X-Men. Okay, well, what if we gave him a team? Okay. This is getting really interesting. Yeah. And it made 18 issues.
I know, I was so sad when it ended. I was like, what are you talking about? Plus, the only character the 2 characters out of the, I guess 3, because you count Mr. Sinister, but like the ones that were done and you never heard from again, Orphan Maker, you know, the Egg Mom, like there's so many characters that they're just like, we don't care anymore. Yeah. And like I said, like I feel like that really encapsulates what I was saying earlier about like potential. Because the whole idea of the Krakoa era was you have heroes, you have villains, let's put them together, see what happens, see what they deal with. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what Hellions was. It was just chaotic, it was fun, everybody had to deal with their trauma and evolve, but then they just like, never mind, it's over. And then like Havoc went here, Psylocke went here, Mr. Sinister was, you know, just Mr. Sinister. Exactly, right? And it just made me really sad that like such a good series just ended.
This is where, like, as a comic book reader for years, I just really struggled with their direction and what they were doing, because you had a good team of art and writer that landed, and you were like, oh, this is good. Makes 18 issues. Now, you know, whether that was, you know, contractual stuff or they had to move somebody on to another project, whatever it was. But I was surprised they didn't just like, okay, if Zeb Wells is moving on to which he's now doing Amazing Spider-Man, or just finishing that up right now, you know, bring in another writer, like bring in somebody else, let them, you know, try it out for a while. But that makes 18 issues. And then I have, you know, on the other hand, I'm looking at it and I'm going, but New Mutants made it to 33.
Who's deciding this?
And I have to say, like, I read every issue up until Inferno of every comic they produced for this. I dreaded New Mutants.
Really?
Dreaded it. And the reason why is because I would sum it up as somebody thought they were writing an Archie comic.
Really?
Like, there was like I'm all for the, you know, getting into the characters and developing the characters and getting to understand them and having, you know, those bits of drama. But when you stop being a superhero comic and the buyer is coming in to buy a superhero comic, and they're getting an Archie comic where it's just a bunch of teen drama, which is ridiculous because they're not even teenagers anymore.
No.
It just... I dreaded it every issue. I knew it was going to be however many pages of just back and forth dialogue of people not liking each other and doing stupid, like it really just didn't land. But that's where I can't understand. That makes it 33 issues. But you have something like Fallen Angels, which I really enjoyed. Made it 6. You know, and you have something like Hellions that made it 18.
Yeah, it made no sense, like, how they decided. It seemed like they just kind of threw darts at the board, see what stuck. And the funny thing is, like, I think we talked about this before, like, when they show slice of life in comic books and stuff like that, it is nice to see once in a while, just to see, like, oh, you know, they love playing baseball together, and, like, what does that mean, you know? But you have to have that balance of, like, there has to be something interesting going on in between the baseball.
And that's the whole thing, is it's like, it is, like, for, you know, all intents and purposes, it is a superhero comic book, so there has to be some superheroing, or else it's not a superhero comic. And if you want to write something else, if this is the you know, the deep dive into X-Men relationships and just personalities and who these characters are and everything else, then you have to pitch it like that, so people know what they're buying. Because when they come in and they're buying a New Mutants, thinking of all the various versions of New Mutants they've had up to this point, and then all of it is like, okay, we're not really doing anything.
Yeah,
like, they're just sitting around
talking,
fighting, and arguing, and it was just it was just very, very dry, and it made the slog of reading all these comics just horrible.
The one for me that stands out the worst for Dawn of X, in my opinion, was Excalibur.
Yeah,
I hated Excalibur. The only reason I kind of, like, tried to give it a chance, one, Apocalypse was on the team, which was insane, but two, it was so integral to X of Swords, or Ten of Swords, whatever you want to call it. Like, you had to read it before the biggest, you know, the first crossover event of the new era, you know, type of thing. So I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I have to read it. But I was hoping for, you know, force yourself to read Excalibur, but then we get into Ten of Swords, it will be different, you know, type of thing.
Yeah.
So what was your lead up into Ten of Swords or Excalibur?
With, like, how I didn't. I liked the art on Excalibur. I thought it was fine. It was good. The writing was, like, with the group of characters that they had on that team. Yeah. It shouldn't have been as bad as it was. It just shouldn't have. And it really leaned into, you know, Avalon and the Captain Britain side of things, which, the old Excalibur did, but the old Excalibur was also super weird. like they dealt with all kinds of stuff, and this was just like, it seemed like they were really hammering in on the kind of almost like fantasy genre, and they were wanting to spend, which I'm pretty sure if Teenie Howard had her choice, they would have probably spent more time there doing that stuff. But it just, again, to your point, it was one of the key comics that you had to read to really get an understanding as to where they were going eventually with Ten of Swords. Yeah.
So, Dawn of X, a lot of potential, some good, some bad. Let's see how we're going. Then they announced the first big crossover event, X of Swords, Ten of Swords, whatever you want to call it. I was pretty excited for this, mainly because, the concept of it sounded really cool. One, they introduced the Arakan mutants, which was, like, the second they showed those guys off, and, like, the designs they did for them, and, like, I was like, what is this? This is amazing. You have these, like, actual mutants who, like, are, like, kind of like Apocalypse theory of what mutantdom should be, and they were separated off, and they're fighting in their entire lives to exist, and it's like, whoa, this is crazy. Then you have 10 of the Krakoan mutants going face to face in a contest, and I think I asked you, like, had they ever done, like, a tournament arc in Marvel before? And they really haven't. So I was very excited. Were you excited, or what was
I was skeptical.
Okay.
At first, because I was just kind of like, okay, 10 of Swords, because they have swords. Like, I just didn't know what I was expecting, and I had a different view. Like, when they introduced Draco, I was like, oh great, now there's more mutants. Yeah. Right. Like, it just didn't land with me, at least the way that the way that maybe it should have. But at the end of the day, once you started getting an understanding as to what was coming, it's like, okay, you got to pick your 10, and we got 10 over here, and it was more like, I guess in the sense, it was kind of almost like the swords were picking the people, and there were combatants that you were just like Doug Ramsey, like, you know, like you know, like some of these people that were getting involved, that you're like, okay, this is going to be interesting, because that person, like Wolverine, I expect Wolverine to be there. You know?
100%. It'd be weird if he wasn't.
But Cypher, you know, like it was just like, it was like, okay, this is interesting. So at the beginning, the build up, in the sense of, like, getting an understanding as to what they were doing and how this combat was going to run down, I was intrigued. Yep. until it started going.
Because because basically what ended up happening for people who haven't read it was they started to do this random competition of like you get points if you win, type of thing, 1v1, and they did actually have some fights. Yes. And the fights that happened were actually like most of the time were really cool because you had these insane like two mutants for the most part didn't know who each other were, had to figure out what was each other's powers, then utilize the swords to defeat them, which was really fascinating. But then you had sections of it where it would like speed run through like a cake eating contest. Yeah. Like Cypher gets married at one point. Like what was going on? Like they had to do I don't know. It's just the most random bullshit.
And that was
like,
the thing.
What?
Is like at that point Hickman was still involved. And I was like, if I were to look at the portion that Hickman was involved with, that there I felt was a trip up and a fail on his part as the first event of this new Krakoa.
Yeah. I think, again, lots of potential. Yeah. The execution is kind of fall flat. Yeah. Some cool moments, and I mean, the way it ends, the best thing, in my opinion, that came out of it, I know you're kind of saying, like, oh, more mutants. I love the Iraqi mutants. I think they're amazing, and, like, there's, like, the Unbeaten, the dinosaur crazy guy. Like, there's so many that are just, like, so cool that you're just, like, I want to see more of you. So I was very excited, at least they found a way to integrate them into the rest of the mutants.
See, I had previously gotten myself used to this with the Grant Morrison.
Yeah. which I do like the Grant Morrison.
Because, most of my X-Men reading growing up, it was spent in the time where mutants were far and few between.
Interesting.
They were hunted, they were not trusted, they were, and then all of a sudden this, like, mutant explosion of, like, millions of mutants all over the place, and like, it took some getting... It was a paradigm shift that still to this day doesn't really sit 100% with me, because I just felt like they were just cramming too much in, and it was. I understand that sometimes you got to take a comic and you got to move it to an area that it hasn't been before or it wasn't before. But that for me, it was just like it was just too much.
Interesting.
It was too much.
See, that's maybe we'll have to do another episode about this because it's interesting to bring it up. That's actually my favorite part about X-Men because, again, when I started reading comics, that was when it was really bringing up. But I love it when they just get a new group of mutants learning their powers, new power sets. What's the plan? And it's all about like them trying to figure out. So it's really interesting that you're saying usually it's like, oh, you have that one team that you stick with for a long period of time.
Yeah, well, you have the one team, and it's not that they're not introducing mutants here and there because, you had back in the day the Marauders, the actual Marauders. You had the Morlocks, you had all these different groups of mutants. There were mutants out there, it's just they were more in hiding, they weren't out in number, they didn't total millions across the planet, and then all of a sudden it was just like the population boomed.
Yeah. And they're getting busy.
The boomer generation for the mutants, and it just went crazy. And for me, it was just, I think it was partially like you're introducing so many new characters, you're introducing so many things, and it's just like, okay, like I've already got like a slate of X-Men to worry about, and now you're going to bring in basically the Araco version of the X-Men over here, and it's like there's just a lot of characters. And to your point, like you bring a character and you're going, hey, that character's kind of interesting. Oh, but we're not going to spend time with them because we got these other 25 to worry about to introduce you. So it's just a little much.
That's true. So now we're getting to, after X of Swords, we're getting to Reign of X, which for me, there wasn't a lot of new ones that came out during that time that I really got into. I kind of just really sticking with the ones that I was already interested in. Yeah. But then with the mixture of what happened after X of Swords, because you had either new mutants you had to deal with from the Iraqi, or you had some people die during X of Swords that then got changed when they died while they were in that alternate plane. Yeah. And so when they came back, they were very different. And like, how do you deal with that? Especially again in Hellions that happened with the Wild Child and all that stuff. So, what did you think of Reign of X?
I felt like for the most of it, because again I read every single issue, I felt it was a lot of filler. Like there really wasn't. Like each of the comics had their own teams and they had their own characters they were following, and there just wasn't like within most comics it's like they'll have like little mini arcs where they're dealing with a particular thing or dealing with a particular person or and this just it felt like it was just like issue after issue after issue of like filler. Like we're just cranking out comics because we're steering us towards the next event. And it just never really got anywhere. Like it felt like it could have been way shorter in order to get to the next event.
Which the next event, I think, was like halfway through Reign of X, which was the Hellfire Gala #1.
Yeah.
And again, we even did a full episode about this when it first came out, about the whole fashion aspect of it. I thought Hellfire Gala was a really cool idea of what they did with it. And then the whole reveal of we now colonized Mars. We reformed it using the mutant circuit idea, and like we have these Omega level mutants that can like birth space stations out of their stomach, type of thing. So Hellfire Gala, I really liked Hellfire Gala. What was your quick on that?
I liked it in the sense of like it introduced, like it was a neat way for them to introduce and then get fans involved, because there was all kind of voting and stuff like that, to say like, okay, we're going to change the X-Men team up, and if it's going to change every year or every couple of years or whatever it's going to be, it was an interesting way to go like, hey, okay, this is their premier event that they introduced the new team. Also, when it's coming around, fans get to get involved because they get to vote for members to be on the team, which I think they should have just expanded more. And said like, look, we're going to put 2 mutants on the team, and then you vote for the rest. Because that would have been great. The fashion side of it, and the was just kind of a fun, quirky thing that they like really in comics. You've never seen anything like that before. So it was interesting. From those aspects, I was glad that it was just held to like an issue. It was just an oversized issue of, here you go, here's the new team. Here's the some little tidbits and little hooks as to where some of this stuff is going, and now we're on to the next stuff.
I liked it also because it the point of Krakoa was supposed to be like, we're our own nation, we have our own trading system, we have all that stuff, and I really felt the Hellfire Gala opened up like bringing in non-mutants to the island and kind of showcasing like, hey, we are our own culture, and it's exactly what you would say about like a diplomatic event.
It would say, you could say, is like, I mean, as far as like your own culture, your own society, like this is a tradition. Right. This is a tradition that you have created for this new nation of Krakoa, and you're going to do it on a regular basis. So it landed. I'm just glad it wasn't like a 4 or 6 issue arc. It was just one issue. Wham bam, we're done. We've introduced, we've brought some stuff in, we've created some new hooks, some new directions as to some of the stuff's going, and off we go. Here we go.
Then Reign of X kind of keeps going with this new status quo, but then you get Inferno, which we kind of already hinted at was kind of like our big final hurrah for Jonathan Hickman, and almost felt like the end of the series, but then it kept going type of thing. So how do you feel about Inferno specifically? Like, what was your pros and cons to it?
My pros were, again, the art was great. The writing overall, like dialogue, writing was good. But then, coming to the end of it and going, oh, Moira is actually the big baddie here. And is working with Orcus because she secretly hates mutants. And and wants to work with Orcus to kind of change everything that's going on. But at the same time is also playing with Professor X and Magneto over here. It just like that, the mix of that suddenly right angle turn just didn't land with me, because at the end of the day, I did read up some stuff on where Hickman was going, and Hickman was like, no, my bad guy that was going to get revealed was Doug Ramsey.
Oh, that would have been so much cooler.
Because Doug Ramsey was the one that was always in the room. He could speak to Krakoa. He was doing all these things on the side. And if you go back to the Hoxpox and look at it, like one of the things at the end was the technovirus that was coming down and was going to basically envelop and was slowly kind of taking over the universe, and that's what Warlock is. So that's the tie to what was there, and I didn't understand the direction they took after Inferno.
See, I don't remember her already being a part of Orcus. What I remember happening was, she said no future seers. Mystique was like, fuck you, I want my wife. And so she kind of like was like, I'm gonna kill you. And then like Charles and Magneto kind of was like, fine, we'll make her not a mutant to make you happy, and we'll kind of move on. Like, the whole Moira of it, we'll kind of like try to move on. But I don't remember her being an Orcus member at that point. I remember her getting kicked out of the mutants and being like, "Fuck you guys." Okay. Just wanted to clarify that, because I was like, wait, I don't remember her already being worked for the Orcus. But anyways, like, I thought Moira was like the most shafted person in all of Krakoa.
Yeah,
like, it's crazy because like she's the reason it started. Like, that's the whole hook of Hoxpox, is that Moira's secretly a mutant.
Exactly.
Her powers are crazy, all this stuff, and then she gets absolutely shafted by Xavier and Magneto, and it's like, what the heck, man? Of course she's gonna go evil. Like, screw you guys.
Yeah, it just didn't. And as a like you know, understanding kind of where Hickman was going with it, like again, linking Hoxpox to where it was and where it was potentially going, kind of made sense, because if you go through, and I can't remember, there was a YouTuber that went on and found all the panels of where Doug Ramsey was doing some creepy shit. It suddenly made sense. It was like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. And then for that not to land, it was kind of like, oh, okay. Oh, and we're just gonna put it on the person that helped us start this in the first place.
Exactly, right?
Didn't make any sense. And then, she gets so mad that she then turns to the group that's trying to eradicate them.
Yeah, it really did.
And she's also been to the future. Like, she remembers going to the future, and she remembers the robots, and she didn't clue into, you know, anything that was going on with that side of the picture. Like, it just to me, it was just like, this seems like hodgepodge put together at the last second, because maybe, you know, Hickman was stepping out and they had to go, okay, well, how do we take the story that was there and shift it so that we can continue? And it just didn't. It didn't make sense.
It didn't make sense. And, like, the Doug Ramsey thing would have been sick. Like, oh, man, that would have been so cool. And again,
like, I had also heard a rumor, and whether this was a thing or it was just somebody, you know, speculating and saying, like, again, you have a thing, and then you could have made it interesting, was that eventually we're going to find out that the original actual mutants were under Krakoa in stasis, and they're being basically kept prisoner. And the clones are not actually them. Right, and then eventually they'd break out and they go fight and whatever. Like, I mean, there were so many different. I've heard on Twitter or YouTube or like so many different directions that people that just thought of. And I would go like, that would have been awesome.
That would have been awesome.
That would have been fun.
So
you know, one of them was the whole story behind, from what I understand, the lives and deaths of Wolverine. Originally, that was, somebody pitched the idea and said, like, okay, Wolverine's memory's kind of foggy. He doesn't always remember everything. What if we explored his 10 most brutal kills that he doesn't even know he did? Right? Like, where he went under, you know, Weapon X and killed somebody that you don't know. And then they could bring all this stuff in. And I was like, that would be so awesome. That'd be so cool to see. I wasn't disappointed with Lives and Deaths. It was okay, but to see that, like, that was maybe an idea that was originally pitched and they turned it into this, like, okay.
Yeah, it's tough when you have, like, again, the theme of the episode in Krakoa is potential, right? Like, there's so much stuff they could have done. In the end, there's always a chance that they do the idea that he sounds really good, and then the execution isn't as good. But there's so much stuff. So now we have Inferno. We have another shakeup in, you know, the way things are. A lot of the council gets shooken up and all that stuff.
Yes, it does.
Which is crazy. So then we get into.
And by the way, at this point, we've now been through 2 eras, and the only person that gets shafted and sent down the well is Sabretooth. Well, I think Overmaker at this point it was.
There
might have been
maybe two. Which, I mean, that whole thing was is random. So then we start getting to Destiny of X. So this is when you get into like, again, you have Mars, you have Magneto and a lot of other people, and Storm, like, kind of leaving the council and going their own direction. You start having Sinister have a lot more control and building that up. So what were your pros and cons of this next section?
I think bringing Al Ewing in was a huge step. I know it's, you know, again, you have the fraction of people that, like, don't like anything that the Krakoa was doing after about halfway, and then you have people that just loved it and want more. I thought Al Ewing was a bright spot for the most part. Like, I like his writing. So I think that was good. I think the highlight on Storm being just a boss was long overdue. Because, again, you know, one of the things you often hear about certain characters as like, oh, you don't see enough of this, and this was an example. It was, you might as well have almost called it the Storm comic,
100%,
because
and Magneto,
Magneto, like just on the side there.
Yeah.
But no, she was a boss, and I was so happy to see that again. And again, just from difference of opinion, I didn't like the Mars thing. I like just
really,
repopulating Mars, and like you got Krakoa, you got Araco, you've got this other plane where the stuff was going on, and now we're on Mars, and it's just like it was just going on and on and on. But the highlight of that is at least they had some good talent. They had good talent on the art for the most part. They had some good talent on the writing. Same thing with the Immortal X-Men. Got more into the politics of what was going on, which was an interesting direction to take a comic where it was more about, okay, what's the Quiet Council doing, and what are the people, what are they really thinking? Where is this going? I thought was good.
Another really cool thing about Mortal was, again, each issue was focused on a different character, member of the council, which was really fascinating. So you really got to know the machinations of each person. So my defense of X-Men Red is just like, again, I love the idea of new mutants. Rocco's there. Some of those powers were absolutely insane, and like the whole idea of their culture and how the Krakoan culture conflicts with that. But I also like the idea of the Racco's having to learn, we were at war for freaking centuries, and now it's peacetime. How do we reconcile with that? And you have that conflict of some people don't want to reconcile that, but still want conflict, right? Plus the fact that like they don't want to be resurrected, so then you had Magneto and Storm opting into like, you're right, we're going to be full of Racco, we're no longer do all that stuff. Plus you had the whole Orcus and the humans going, wow, they populated Mars. There's more of them.
Shit. Was really
he was so mad, type of thing. So that's crazy. So those were definitely the two highlights for that one. For me though, the rest of them, this is starting to get into the point where it's like I started to get a little bit repetitive. Like I was reading X-Force pretty religiously. I was reading X-Men, those type of stuff, and it just felt like this same thing over and over and over again. And then like again, to me, like there's so much more stuff they could have shown with Krakoa that was more interesting. Like for example, there's issues with X-Force where Orcus sneaks in and kidnaps some kids, and I'm just like, who the fuck had kids already? Like who are these kids belong to? Like that's a whole area of Krakoa, and like the idea of like having kids getting raised not from like a Earth perspective, from a Krakoa perspective of their language and their stuff. And obviously they hinted at that when I remember there was a point where like they mentioned like Scarlet Witch, like the kids would call her like the boogeyman essentially, and like they had that whole idea of their culture. And it's, again, it's so much stuff that they could have at this point. It's like 2 or 3 years into this where it's like, come on, we could have done this. Plus, again, it was the same characters. It was just Wolverine, focus on Wolverine, Storm, the ones we see all the time, which a lot of them were amazing. Like, again, Storm, Magneto were amazing. But there's so many more mutants that you could have showcased and highlighted, right?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, it was overall, I would say it was an opportunity. Like, this is where they really hit. Okay, we're gonna write some more. We're gonna stay in the Krakoan age. We have an opportunity to really explore this. And if you were going to explore it with any other team book, like if you were doing this with like the Avengers or something like that, it's just one more. This was the book to land it with, and for some reason, again, it didn't stick with some people. I think this was probably one of the periods where they had the most turnover for comics and issues coming out and stuff that they were trying to do. That only made it 4 issues. 6 issues. Like that's
why even greenlight it.
I want to say like that's embarrassing. That you only get that far. So there was a lot of upheaval that way. A lot of different comics. But if you really wanted to lean in, if you were really like, hey, this Krakoan age can't end. We've got so many great then why didn't you?
Yeah, exactly.
Like it didn't go anywhere.
Exactly.
And to your point, there could have been so many more explorations of like, what would a mutant think who was born, raised, and brought up on Krakoa? And didn't know the rest of the world.
Yeah, what would their relationship have been like? As it's going along, Hellfire Gala 2, I don't remember anything happening there. I think it was just team change, which isn't bad. Again, always interested in fan voting.
And the thing that I would say about the team thing changing, that was the disappointing part was, you'd vote in. You remember I remember one point I voted in Sunfire. I was like, I'll vote for Sunfire. He made the team. They did nothing with him.
No. Yeah. He literally did nothing the entire time he's with X-Men.
Like, and it's like I don't understand like why you're like the fans want to see this. Hello.
Yeah.
So dig into it a little bit, and it just didn't.
Yeah.
Which really made the one of the mainstay comics of the entire X-Men. It's the X-Men.
Yeah.
Just feel like
Exactly. Then the other thing that really put a hamper on a lot of plans. For example, like we were saying, X-Men Red, so good, really good momentum. Then just AXE Judgment Day happens.
Yes.
And just hard stops everything Al Ewing was building up and like murders half his cast and all this stuff. Yeah. I actually didn't read Axe because you said don't. Yes. So like, what was your general sentiment about Axe?
It was outside of the art. Mm-hmm. It was a massacre. It kind of reminded me of Ultimatum in the sense of like they just went buck wild. Let's just kill everybody in this catastrophe, and then at the end just go but psych. Yeah, we're just gonna put everything back the way it was, and it just really didn't land. Like I understood the premise of it. Like you had Druig, who had taken over as the supreme leader of the Eternals. Had pointed out and said, no, the X-Men are deviants. They're deviants because they are just willy-nilly with their resurrection protocols. They're deviants. We now classify them as deviants. We're going after them because at the end of the day, it's really like because resurrection's our thing.
They're jealous.
They're jealous. I don't know how the Avengers got in there.
Yeah, that was
like
very
other
random.
than like we know you guys. So we were
like a third party. Like very very much third wheeling.
But
we can't spell Axe without the A. So they
they were like, who could we put in there? They could put an Amazing Spider-Man.
Oh dang it!
But no, it just really. I mean, if you just wanted to read an interesting comic where people were just getting absolutely massacred left and right, sure. But as far as like propelling the story forward or whatever, like it really didn't. I didn't feel any worse or better about the conflict between the Eternals and the X-Men, and I feel like when it ended, yes, they all had to team up at the end and take out the Sentinel, but at the end it was just like, okay, high five, let's just go home and go back to our own. Like there was no repercussions.
It felt so forced for no reason. Yes. Like it was just like, what was the point? It was
bad, and I think the worst moment in the whole thing, and I understand because this is where the, again, mutants were starting to change. They were going like, man, we need to take these, at least the Krakoan ones, or we need to take the resurrection protocols to the next level because like look at all these humans, look at all these lives that are lost. Like we got to help out with this, and their first one that they bring back, we need a leader, and they're like, yeah, we need Cyclops. Cyclops needs to come back, and I'm like, no, we need a leader. And the egg breaks, and it's Captain America's arm coming through it, which is cool, but he has his shield
in the egg.
In the egg?
That's so stupid.
Yeah, I was like, what? How did he have a shield? Did they put it in there with him? And like when you're first resurrected, you're just like, like like, how did he know to grab it?
Oh man, it's because he's Captain America.
It's because he's Captain America. It didn't make any sense. And the only saving grace for the entire thing, really, for the most part, was the art. Mm-hmm. The art was amazing.
The one saving grace I'll give it. Again, I was reading X-Men Red, and they had their tie-ins or whatever. There's a scene where Uranos, which the whole Uranos thing is so cool, but like they killed so many people. Yeah. He punches Magneto's heart out.
Yes.
So you're like, Magneto's fucking dead. Yeah. Magneto then gets up, uses his magnetism to pump his own blood with no heart. So he has this hole in his chest, and you can see the blood flowing within him. That's the fucking metalist thing I've ever seen. It was so cool.
That was, I would say, like, out of all of that stuff, like, because it expanded. Again, this is one of those, earth-shattering, hey, we're gonna slam this on everybody, from Amazing Spider-Man to Fantastic Four to everybody's getting messed up by this axe thing. And I would say, like, that was probably the best part of it. Was sending, when they were like, okay, well, we need to start taking these guys out and just kill them because they're breaking our rules, and we're going to send Uranus to just murder everybody. Hey, dude, you have an hour.
Oh. And the carnage he fucking does is insane. Yeah. Okay, so that was definitely like a highlight out of a really messy situation.
Really messy.
Speaking of messy slash weird. Then we get into Sins of Sinister.
Oh boy.
Like I don't even know where to start.
So did you read the whole thing?
I read the whole thing.
Okay, so I read the whole thing, and I didn't care about the Dominion.
No.
Like they tried to paint this Dominion and bringing in all these other Sinisters, and like I go back to when Sinister was running the Marauders and right before Inferno and stuff, and he was crazy.
Yeah.
But he was very calculating, very smart, very like scary.
Yeah.
Then. And I can't remember who it was, took over writing X-Men, Uncanny X-Men at one point, and turned him into this like flamboyant, it was like just a completely different take on the character, which I didn't really like until I saw other people writing him, such as Zeb Wells. And then I was like, that's good, because even though he's flamboyant and just like really outwardly seems crazy.
Yeah.
There's like this calculating part of him that's dangerously scary. I felt like I don't know. I really felt like through the past Inferno, it just really started to fall off.
Yeah, Sins of Sinister is such a weird one because like they were building it up in Immortal X-Men, and it was like, okay, what's going on? Then you get to Sins of Sinister, and it just keeps time jumping, and like crazy shit is happening off screen. You're like,
10, 100,000,
10,000, like it just crazy shit keeps happening. You're like, what the fuck is going on? Yeah. Then it randomly just reverts, and it never happened. Yeah. And it was like, what was the point of that?
This is what I took. This is what I took from this. This is my take. Is I love Sinister. He is by far, although Apocalypse after the end of this was definitely climbing the ladder. But Sinister is one of my favorite, if not my favorite, X-Men villain. Didn't like the series. I like the idea of what he was doing. Like that's dangerous. Like you let this guy be in charge or have some control over your resurrection protocol and stuff, and he's like slipping little bits of him into that the idea of that was kind of like, oh yeah, that's definitely something Sinister would do.
Yeah.
But the comics itself, it felt like the writer or whoever came up with that plan was like, I really wish I wrote Age of Apocalypse. So how could I write my own Age of Apocalypse? Oh, Sinister. And it was just a retread of the exact same thing. There's an event that takes place. It sends the timeline spiraling forward in a really weird, bizarre way. And then it all gets cleaned up in the end because at the end of the day, something happens and it reverts.
Yeah. Yeah, and to me, like, I don't think it needed to be its own. No. I guess you would call it a mini series, like a crossover event or something like that. I feel like it could have just been stuck in Immortal X-Men, being like just a major plot point in Immortal X-Men, not affect everything else, and you would have been fine.
No, like I mean, at the most, maybe you have a run that goes between all the X-Men comics or something. Like at the most, but just like shutting everything down and spreading it into these 3 titles that it was a bit
excessive.
Yeah.
And again, great potential, and some of the, like they managed to get Rasputin into the main, which awesome. Maybe that was the entire point. They really were like, we loved Rasputin and Hoxpox, that we need to find some way to get it.
How is this person around?
Yeah. So that's the only reason they did it. So then we get into Hellfire Gala 3. So the whole, like, the thing that makes me the most sad about this is the fact that like the team that almost happened out of Hellfire Gala 3 sounded so cool. Like you had Juggernaut, you had like, Sync and Talon were going to be the main leaders. No more Cyclops, Jean Grey, which makes me happy, type of thing. But so much potential. But then it just turns into this crazy Orcus massacre hullabaloo.
Yes.
And then everything goes to shit. From there. So like, what's your idea? Like Hellfire Gala 3 plus Fall of X? What are you feeling?
I was feeling like at this point the Krakoa thing was spreading out too far. Like it had ruined Iron Man. And sometimes this is the problem that you have because you got Jerry Duggan writing X-Men, and then you also had him writing the Iron Man. So I mean, a lot of the times that's what these writers do is they find a way to connect them. And Iron Man's connection, like I liked the whole him with Emma Frost thing because they just hated each other, which appears to have maybe changed towards the end, but it just started to spread out, and all of a sudden you've got the Fall going on. And it was like, okay, so we're building, we want to stay here a little bit longer, but then when you want to shut it off, you just turn the tap off completely, and it just goes to hell.
Yeah, like I hated the fact that, like, you know, Kate Pryde just like turns into like this crazy assassin, you know, which, like, I mean, it's cool and it's not, but it just felt such a sudden change of like, what the fuck's, like, you build her up so much in Marauders and all that stuff to be like a leader, and then something like now
character.
but now she turns into like this lone wolf assassin.
Yeah,
and it's like, what's going on?
All he did was revert her to, you know, the training she was getting in the miniseries of Wolverine and Kitty Pryde.
Yeah,
I mean, you just went back to a Claremont thing and said,
sure.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Which again, it like really, like, a lot of this. That's a perfect example of stuff of like, you built up so much stuff during the Krakoa era, but the second you hit Fall of X, it's like, forget it. We're reverting back to anyways. Who cares?
Yes.
And like, again, if all of it just felt very rushed. Like, I feel like when I found out that the last X-Men was Legacy number 700, I was like, oh. They just wanted to rush it so that it would fall on the 700th issue. It's like, okay, that makes sense.
There was also, I you know, in doing some of the reading, just trying to find out some of the background information on this stuff. A part of that was also my favorite guy, Kevin Feige, saying, you got to put an end to this because we're now putting the comics, you know, X-Men into the MCU.
Really?
And they need to be a little more
manageable,
because there's no way they would have introduced them in the MCU like the Krakoan era. And they want that connection, they want that synergy of, if this is what it's like over here, this is what it's like over here.
Yeah.
Right? And that's another reason that it got
interesting.
Rushed,
okay.
Was to put it back to more of a state of, I hate to say state of the norm for most people that maybe aren't comic book readers, and you just ask them like, oh, who are the X-Men, and they'd be like, oh, it's these people.
Yeah, Cyclops.
You know? Maybe they watched X-Men 97, you know. That's about it.
Which is a good point. Like, which, I mean, I guess the X-Men 97 didn't come out to like the very end of Fall of X, but people, they're definitely trying to reset back to zero. The one thing, and like the one highlight for me in all this was Dark X-Men. I don't know if you ever checked it out. I love the idea of Madeline Pryor getting her own shine and being like, I'm gonna run my own team, and like this weird idea of like, I'm a safe haven because of Limbo was really cool idea. But again, it was like 5 issues, and then it was over. And it's like, come on, like, you guys have every time.
You know, and again, it felt like, you know, the fall hit, and then they had all of these different comics coming out. It just, again, it felt like just too much. It was like, I can't even count how many comics there were in that group between Uncanny Avengers, you know, Uncanny Spider-Man, you know, the Legion of, or Realm of X, like all of these different comics. And it's like, okay, now I went from here collecting already too many comics for X-Men, and now I got to shift over here and buy all these comics for X-Men. Again, it felt like another one of those, not in the sense of like the story, but the way they did it was very similar to Age of Apocalypse. But the difference with the Age of Apocalypse, if I had a subscription service for X-Men, the Uncanny X-Men, and it turned into the Amazing X-Men, I got the Amazing X-Men.
Oh, okay.
Right? Because it was just a part of it was almost like, that comic never existed. It's always been the Amazing X-Men. So here you go.
There you go.
Right? Whereas this was like, no, now I got to go buy these, like, 10 other series that are going on. It just felt, again, just too much.
Yeah. And where they leave off with, I mean, spoilers if you haven't read it yet, but like the way they would leave off with Krakoa being the white hot room, you hinted at it earlier, you had Phoenix going against the Dominion and all that stuff. Like, I do appreciate the fact that they try to like save some of Krakoa. Like, you have it in the alternate dimension and, like, you know, 15 years in the future and like all this stuff. That's interesting, at least if they can go back to it if they have to. I'm just worried that when they go back to it, they're going to bastardize it or something, right? So it's one of those things that's going to be like a axe hanging over your head of like, when is that going to fall, of, you know, 5 years from now they bring back Krakoa part 2 and then it's a shit show, you know. That's my fear. But I'm glad they kept some of it going, right?
I mean, I just didn't care.
No, fair enough.
You know, like, it was at this point the only thing I was looking for, because in every other example of when he has shown up is when Nimrod's been fighting the X-Men. It's a brawl.
Yep.
It is such a brawl, and people are going down and people are getting hurt, and because he is just such a tank. That's really the only thing I was looking forward to, is like, I'm looking forward to seeing him lay the smackdown on some of the X-Men.
Yeah.
Outside of that, like, I didn't care about the rest. Like,
No.
like I and I'm forgetting her name at the moment. The Sentinel, this hybrid Sentinel human.
I don't remember her name either.
You know, at one point, like, she's hanging out, and Psylocke jumps in and stabs her in the head with her psychic blade, and takes out the Sentinel part of her brain. Like,
What?
it's like, but that's a program.
Yeah, that makes no sense.
It doesn't make any sense. Like, it just like things like that, and then where they left Moira, where it just the whole thing was like rushed, sloppy. Yeah.
So again, I didn't read all of them because it's just way too confusing.
Yeah.
I kind of read the main one.
Yeah.
What happened to Charles Xavier? What happened? Because he turns evil?
I've seen some people take some, give their takes on it, and it was like they tried to do this, like, it's a switcheroo, like if you've read issue 35 or issue 700, whatever you want to call it, because both, which I don't understand, you have a legacy issue number 700 for Uncanny X-Men, but X-Men itself has a legacy number, but then they're both 700. It doesn't make any sense. With that aside, 700.
700.
Here we are.
Round number.
Is you did the flipperoo where it's like, no. Guess what? You've been reading the wrong. You've been reading the comic wrong the whole time. Xavier's the bad one.
Oh.
Xavier's the one that's it was Magneto the whole time. He's the one that they should have been listening to, and it's like, it just didn't land.
No,
it just didn't land. Like, I understood especially with the resurrection of Magneto, which was actually quite good. In my opinion, as far as a deep dive into, like, just the horrible crap that guy has done, and who he is, and, like, I would imagine if they resurrected him and then he came back to, oh my God, what's going on? Follow me, the fall of X is going on, and then he deals with that he's going to be a changed person, going through that experience. I get that, but to just do the whole flippity flop and go like, oh yeah, Xavier, just at some point, and, like, to me, I just kept thinking, like, oh, is it because that Xavier still has, like, a little bit of the sinister in him?
Yeah.
Like, is that why? But it's like, when it came to the breaking point for him to make the decision to say, like, no, it's definitely mutants before anything else, and humans just have to die then, is just like, what?
Oh yeah. Goes against everything he's believed in his entire life.
And I think that would be one of the things that I find about the whole thing, and we'll probably do that at a wrap up at the end, but just that the flip-flop didn't make any sense. He's suddenly a bad guy. Magneto's not just a good guy, which made sense, but now, like, the ultimate, like, the uber guy that we should have been following, like, that's the guy.
Magneto was right.
It just didn't make any sense. Again, it was just rushed, and I didn't care.
So, like you said, to kind of wrap this up, like, overall thoughts, plus, would you recommend people that, like I said, I have a new coworker, he's like, where do I even start? Do you go, hey, these are the highlights from Krakoa, check them out, and then go to Fall from the Ashes? Or do you tell people, just go to From the Ashes and go from there?
If you're looking to, like, start reading wholesale, like, hey, I'm gonna read every issue moving forward, just start with From the Ashes, because it's new, and you can go forward from there. I would recommend to somebody that if they were going to look at it, it's like, no, let's go back to some X-Men classic collections or something that maybe take great storylines like Fall of Mutants or E is for Extinction, or these kinds of things, and like so you get a baseline of, like, oh, okay, what have the X-Men gone through? I wouldn't start them on this, because at the end of the day, I felt like it was a good idea that they made the wrong decision with. Were there some highlights? Sure. And maybe it doesn't sound like it. At least what I've been saying, there were some highlights. But at the end of the day, I just felt like they made too many mistakes in making some paradigm shifting changes to not only characters, but cultural ideas of who the X-Men are, to just where their powers come from, how it just was broken. Like, because they just, some of it was like, okay, okay, you tried to explain it. Some of it they made changes. Like, did we ever get an answer why Kitty Pryde couldn't go through?
No. They never did explain that.
No. So they didn't. They didn't explain that. Like it just like it's just character changing, ideas of like, when you introduce a hook, finish it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you can't just like, oh, she just can't go through it, and then turn around. And I know their explanation was like, oh, it had something to do with her phasing powers. It was like, what do you mean it had something to do with her phasing powers? Did you guys have no idea what you were doing with this?
Oh, that was so dumb.
It's just really messy.
Yeah.
Like, could I go through and pick out some pockets and say, yeah, read this and read that? Sure. But overall, if it was like, I wouldn't start somebody at the beginning of, Powers and House and say, yeah, read all the way through.
No.
It's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, like we said, we didn't even read all the way through, right?
No.
Like it's funny, before we recorded this podcast, I felt like I was way more positive on it, but then now we talk about like, yeah, again, there's some glaring, awesome parts, but for the most part, it's kind of like muddled down.
The positive comes from what potential was there.
100%.
There was some great potential to really set up an ongoing paradigm shift for the X-Men that was great. But again, when you have a studio exec working against that, apparently, when you have, people that were like not really in the room when this whole thing was getting started, and then trying to piece together loosely, really badly, what happened in House and Powers with Rise of Powers and Fall, the Fall. It's like they didn't mesh.
No,
and it's because like none of them was in Hickman's brain. He was too busy writing Gods and moving on to his other stuff. Yeah. So it was just messy.
It was just
that's the word I want to use. It's just messy, and it caused a lot of division between fans.
Yeah. So speaking of potential, we're now going into From the Ashes, which is going to start this summer pretty soon here. They've announced already a huge slate of books. Originally, they only announced 3, and I was like, oh, okay, they're toning it back. That seems reasonable.
They didn't learn their lesson.
No, they keep announcing more books, right? So what's your hopes in general for From the Ashes before we get into specifics? Like, what's your general hope?
My general hope is basically... like any time you move out of like one age or one era to a next, is like establish something different, and then move forward with it. And I hope the creative team that establishes it gets to stay with it.
Yeah, show your vision.
Show that whole thing through. Because I think there probably was a way for them to hold on to Hickman's idea, keep Hickman along, and then still honor what the other people were saying. And with this, I hope it's the same thing. It's like you brought a whole bunch of new people in. You've got some great artists on some of the titles. The writers, I'm a little wishy-washy on. Jed McKay's taking over X-Men. My fear is he's already on Avengers. How the hell is that going to work? Like those are 2 team books. That's tough. And then you've got, I think it's Gail Simone on Uncanny.
Yep.
And I can't remember who was on Exceptional.
Eve Ewing.
Yep. And then partnered with some good artists, some interesting concepts. You've got like, Cyclops military force thing. That's what that one looks like. It's like typical, Cyclops and Magneto up to their, same shtick.
Yeah.
But I just hope they get to establish something and move forward with it.
Yeah.
Don't go backwards. Move forward.
Yeah. What I do like, though, in some of the previews, especially in X-Men or Uncanny X-Men 700, they kind of implied that it's not like they're just going to ignore Krakoa, which I do appreciate.
Yeah.
One of my fears was that they were going to be like, oh, it never happened. Don't worry about it. It definitely feels like,
you can't.
No, you can't. Like, Krakoa happened. How do we move forward from there? And the fact that they brought back a lot of the mutants who died in Genosha was really fascinating. Of like, there's more mutants again, but now they're way more integrated into our regular society as opposed to segregated onto their own island.
See, and that's the thing. Like with the end of the Krakoa that didn't stick very well. Like was the fact that they just went like, oh, it's over. Everybody go home.
Yeah.
And they just sent everybody home across the world to go back to their parents and their families and everything else. It's like, oh, okay.
It could have been. I feel like it could have been handled a bit better. Yeah. But again, the idea behind it is interesting enough that you can kind of mix what you had pre-M Day with now the current status quo post Krakoa, and like have that clash. So this is a slight tangent, but kind of it'll prove my point, or not prove my point, but kind of get into my point. Did you watch X-Men 97?
No.
Okay, highly recommend. Because the thing I love the most about X-Men 97 is you had that classic X-Men feel of like the traditional team and like familiar faces, and like the idea of like them being mutants, ambassadors, but also like superheroes. But it had a very modern feel to it. Like the things they handled, like you could tell, like obviously X-Men has always been a allegory for racism and segregation and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But like the way X-Men 97 handled that was so fascinating, because they did it in such a modern way while still being 90s, which is hilarious. So I highly recommend go watch it. But that's kind of my hope for like they'll learn from that, is like you can still do traditional X-Men of like they're superheroes, they go to save people, but still have that modern sensibility of like how do we deal with mutants integrated within human society, right? Like I think that'd be really fascinating. So the ones that kind of stick out for me that I'm very excited for is Exceptional X-Men.
Right.
Like I said, my favorite X-Men stories are when you introduce new mutants and like they have new powers and they're trying to learn how do we work as a team and like how do I use my powers and stuff like that. And it's essentially what Evie Ewing's doing but then you have Kate Pryde and Emma Frost as the teachers. The second again you put those two together, give them some.
It's gonna be interesting.
This book is essentially made for me at this point. So I'm very excited for that. Were there any that kind of stood out for you that you're really excited for?
Well, you got the nostalgic book, which is the Uncanny X-Men.
Yep.
Right. I mean, it's probably as close as you can get to X-Men 97.
Yeah.
Without being X-Men 97.
Yeah.
So I mean, you have a lot of the classic. I like Wolverine. I love Nightcrawler. Haven't exactly loved what they've done with the character over the many years since he died. But a lot of the characters are like very curious to see that book. The other book I liked with the X-Men. What I liked was there was some familiar faces. You have Magneto there.
Yep.
You've got Juggernaut. Everybody knows Juggernaut.
Cyclops.
Beast. Although Beast, I mean, in all honesty, after what happened with Krakoa and every other series, like somewhere in there, Beast. They just need to put him down because at some point this guy goes bad.
You know what's funny? I forgot to mention that we said Moria was the number one shafted person.
Yeah.
Beast was the second most shafted person.
Yeah.
Like he turned into such a dick. Like what?
But that's the things I like when they make him a dick.
Really?
I like it. I like it in the sense of like he just is. I don't know. I just like the persona of what he's like the dark beast kind of persona. I like it in the sense of like it's just like he's just so mean and dickish.
Yeah,
it's just the thing I don't like is knowing the character from years before.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, exactly. You go from Stars and Garters, which is essentially what they're reverting back to Dark Beast, and it's just like it made no sense in Krakoa.
No, like it doesn't make sense with the character, and it seems like in every era there was the Grant Morrison era.
Yep.
He was bad. You have the Age of Apocalypse. He was bad.
Yeah.
Like he keeps turning bad. Somebody do this with. Stop having him on a team.
Well, even look at the artwork they have for X-Men. He looks evil. Like what are they doing?
Like you've got some familiar faces on the team, which is great, but then you've got some maybe or like one at least to start with character that's not. I mean, she's been around for a while, but never really given any real face time.
I've never heard of Temper. So.
Yeah, so I mean, it's an interesting team. I think the Exceptional, to your point, is going to be interesting just because of the fact that it's like, hey, newbies.
Yeah. I like newbies. I just like newbies.
And I have no idea who they are, so I mean, there's always an appeal to that. Going, what do they do?
Yeah.
Who are they? Will be interesting.
Yeah.
X-Force is X-Force.
It's the same every time.
It's always just a group of a group of X-Men that are willing to do a whole bunch of really bad stuff.
Yeah.
The one that the thing I don't understand is like they expanded into 3 X-Men books, which is in my opinion still a lot. Then you have NYX. Then you've got X-Force. Then you've got X-Factor.
Yeah.
Storm is now joining the Avengers. Don't know anybody who asked for a Dazzler book.
So the theory on that one is a lot of people think she's going to be in Deadpool Wolverine.
Probably.
And it might be Taylor Swift.
Yes.
So that's why it's like, it's a good chance Dazzler's in.
Storm book, I've got zero problems with because it's long overdue for her. Mm-hmm. She's a great character and just has been shafted over years. I don't need a Mystique book. A bunch of Sentinels.
The Sentinel ones, I'm curious. That one's very much like, I don't expect it to be good. I'm just curious to see what they're going to do. It's such a weird...
What are they doing with it?
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Kind of thing.
Yeah.
The Wolverine...
it's Wolverine. He's always going to have a book.
Wolverine. Other
50
than,
years.
We've talked about the fact that he's supposed to be on this group that's in, I think it's in Louisiana.
Oh, yeah.
In New Orleans.
Yeah.
And... but in his own comic, he's supposed to be in Canada running around with wolves and just kind of done with it all.
Yeah.
I don't know how that's going to work.
No.
That's a hell of a commute.
Hey, they have planes.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm always interested. New comics, new series are always interesting because you just don't know where they're going to go. I do, unlike a lot of people have seen on Twitter, I have liked what Jed McKay's done with the Avengers. It's not been like out of this world, earth shattering, but it's been good,
solid.
So I'm interested to see that. I'm always interested to see what they do next. I just hope that again they see it through, and if the fan base is calling and saying, "Hey man, this ain't working," then you got to change it. Like you got to make that other shift.
Yeah.
The only problem with the Krakoa one that I see was I think the fan base, both sides will say like, oh, there's barely fans on either side. I think it was more closer to a 50-50 in the sense of like some people were more probably in the middle. Like, I don't mind this. It's missing a lot of elements that I see that it could be. Could they end it? Sure. Do I want it to go on? Well, yeah, if they fix it, sure.
Yeah.
And I think that's where most people landed.
Yeah. In the end, we love X-Men.
Yeah.
We're going to give it a try, see where it goes, and we'll see what happens, right?
Yep.
So that kind of wraps up the Krakoa era, which is pretty wild.
It was a long time.
It was a long time, yeah. A lot has happened in 5 years, so there you go, right?
It has, and again, curious to see where they take it from here.
Yeah. So speaking of taking it from here, where we're going to take this podcast, like we said, we took a pretty big break, and now we're suddenly back. Mm-hmm. Our hope is to continue doing this again monthly, but we will definitely see what happens.
Yep.
Make sure to follow us wherever you follow us. Make sure to let us know what you think, and I guess we'll see you all next time.
See you later.